Okay, let's dive headfirst into a world that exists just inches beneath your shoes. A hidden realm. Incredible life and partnership happening down there that supports pretty much everything you see above ground.
Absolutely. From the tallest tree to the smallest blade of grass.
Yeah. And today our focus is on one of the most crucial, yet often unseen players in that underground drama, mycorrhizae.
Mycorrhizae. It sounds, well, technical maybe, but it's actually a really beautiful concept once you get into it.
Right. So we've gathered a bunch of sources for this deep dive, research papers, articles, all exploring this ancient vital connection, this link between fungi and plant roots.
Yeah, and our mission today is really to pull back the curtain. We want to unpack what mycorrhizae are, how this amazing underground partnership actually works.
How it functions day to day.
Exactly. And why it's not just important for plants, but, potentially for our future too. And crucially, what steps you can take to maybe nurture these networks in the soil around you.
Okay, let's get started then. What exactly are we talking about when we say mycorrhiza?
Okay, so at its simplest, the word mycorrhiza. It's basically a mashup of Greek words. It means fungus and root. Fungus root.
Fungus root. Simple, huh?
And it describes this special kind of symbiosis, a relationship where two different organisms live really closely together, usually for mutual benefit.
Okay, so symbiosis,
Hmm.
meaning they both get something out of it.
Uh,
It's a win-win deal happening down there.
Exactly. It's a classic win-win. The plant, you see, using sunlight, it's a master at making energy. Sugars, basically.
Right. Photosynthesis.
Photosynthesis. And it shares a significant chunk of that energy with its fungal partner. Some studies suggest up to 20% of the carbon the plant fixes from the air actually goes to the fungus.
50%. Wow, that's a lot.
It is. And the plant also provides certain fats, lipids that the fungus needs, but can't make itself.
Okay, so the plant is providing the energy, the fuel. What's the fungus giving back for that hefty payment?
Well, the fungus becomes the plant's ultimate explorer and nutrient collector. It massively expands the plant's ability to access water and minerals from the soil.
More than the roots alone could.
Oh, much more, especially nutrients that are like really hard for roots to get on their own. Things like phosphorus, zinc, copper.
Mm.
It's a classic trade. Sugar for resources.
All right, so the plant gives sugar, fungus gives nutrients and water. But how? How does the fungus actually do that? How does it reach resources the plant roots just can't get to?
Well, this is where the fungus's unique structure is, well, key. Fungi are made up of these tiny, tiny thread-like filaments. They're called hyphae.
Hyphae.
And when these hyphae grow together in a big network, they form what most people would recognize as mycelium. Sometimes you see that white fuzzy stuff in the soil or on rotting wood. That's mycelium.
Okay, like an underground web.
Precisely, a living web. And these hyphae are incredibly thin, much, much narrower than even the finest root hairs on a plant.
Really? That thin?
Yeah, and that thinness gives them a kind of superpower.
Yeah.
They can navigate through tiny pores and crevices in the soil that roots are simply too bulky to enter. And they also spread out like way further than the roots do. They get beyond that zone, right around the root, where the plant might have already used up the easy-to-reach nutrients.
So they're like microscopic prospectors then, mining nutrients from places the plant itself could never touch.
That's a really good way to think about it, yeah. This huge network of hyphae acts like a massive extension of the plant's root system. It just dramatically increases the surface area available for absorbing water and minerals.
And I guess that matters most in poor soils.
Oh, definitely. The impact is often most visible in nutrient-poor soils, where this fungal help can make a huge, huge difference to the plant's survival and growth.
Which nutrients are they particularly good at scavenging?
Well, the sources really highlight their crucial role in getting nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, the big three, right?
NPK, yeah.
Exactly. And phosphorus is, well, it's notoriously immobile in the soil that doesn't move much, so roots basically have to grow right to it.
Which is inefficient.
Very inefficient. But fungi solve this problem. The hyphae grow to the phosphorus, exploring a much larger volume of soil. And they can even unlock phosphorus that's tied up in organic matter, stuff the plant can't use directly. They make it available.
How do they do that? Unlock it.
They can release enzymes, essentially, that break down those organic compounds. Then they absorb the phosphate, sometimes store it as something called polyphosphate, and transport it back to the plant like a little nutrient
And
bank.
what about nitrogen? Also super important.
Yep. For nitrogen, the fungal network is also really versatile. It can absorb different forms found in the soil, ammonium, nitrate, even some simple amino acids. They have these specialized protein transporters to pull these nitrogen compounds in and shuttle them back to their plant partner.
Okay, that alone sounds incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
Boosting nutrient uptake, getting more water. But the benefits go even further, don't they? The sources mentioned mycorrhizae do more than just, feed the plant.
Oh, absolutely. This partnership provides significant protection, and it even improves the soil itself. It's quite amazing.
Protection. How do they protect the plant from things like, say, diseases, pathogens?
Right. So the sources detail several ways this happens. First, you can think of that fungal network around the root, especially the ectomycorrhizal kind we'll maybe talk about later, like a protective shield.
A physical barrier.
Yeah, a physical barrier makes it harder for harmful soil pathogens to actually reach the root surface and infect it. But on top of that, just the presence of the beneficial fungi seems to prime the plant's own natural defense systems.
Puts it on alert.
Exactly. Puts the plant on higher alert, makes it tougher systemically. And some of these fungi can even produce antibiotic compounds themselves, things that directly inhibit the growth of certain pathogens.
So they build a moat, raise the drawbridge, and maybe even deploy some chemical weapons.
In a way, yes. It's a good analogy. There's also this idea of competitive inhibition, because the beneficial fungus is taking a lot of carbon, that sugar payment we talked about from the plant.
Right, the 20%?
There's simply less food available right there at the root surface for potential pathogens trying to move in. They get outcompeted. Plus, forming this partnership actually boosts the plant's own production of internal defense chemicals, things like phenolics, phytoalexins, making it more resistant from the inside out.
Okay, defense against diseases. What about toxic stuff in the soil, like heavy metals? Can they help with that too?
Yes, this is another really fascinating protective role they play. In soils that have elevated levels of metals, think copper, zinc, cadmium, maybe from pollution or just naturally acidic conditions, mycorrhizal fungi can act as a buffer.
How? Do they soak them up?
Some types, yeah, particularly the ectomycorrhizae, often found with trees, can actually accumulate and sort of lock up these heavy metals within their own fungal structures in that mantle sheath around the root.
So they trap them.
They trap them, immobilize them, preventing large amounts from being absorbed by the plant roots where they could cause damage. They have various mechanisms binding them outside the root, trapping them in cell walls, storing them safely away inside the fungal tissue itself.
Wow, that's incredible.
It really is. And this contributes to the plant's ability to tolerate contaminated sites. It's actually a mechanism involved in phytoremediation, using plants to clean up polluted soils. The fungi are key players.
So they're not just nutrient couriers and bodyguards. They're also acting as a kind of detoxification system for the plant.
You could definitely say that, yeah. And beyond protecting the plant directly, they physically improve the soil around them.
How so?
Well, those fungal hyphae, those threads weaving through the soil, they actually act like tiny ropes, binding individual soil particles together. They help form stable clumps, or what soil scientists call aggregates.
Like natural glue, holding the soil together.
Exactly, a kind of biological glue. And this aggregation is super important. It creates better soil structure, meaning it makes the soil more porous, more crumbly. It creates little air pockets and channels. And why that matters is, well, it allows water to soak in better instead of running off.
Good for rainfall.
Yeah, and it helps the soil hold that water more effectively, which is vital, especially in dry conditions. Plus, it improves air circulation down there, which roots and other beneficial soil organisms need.
Right. And you mentioned earlier they interact with other soil life, too. It's not just the fungus in the plant.
No, definitely not. They don't exist in a vacuum. The presence and activity of mycorrhizal fungi really influence the whole microbial neighborhood right around the root, that zone called the rhizosphere.
The rhizosphere, okay.
They can work synergistically, hand in hand with other beneficial soil microbes, maybe helping with nutrient cycling or providing even more protection against pathogens, like a community effort.
A team effort underground.
Exactly. And the plant itself, when it's partnered with fungi, actually changes the cocktail of chemicals, the exudates it releases from its roots. And those exudates, in turn, influence which other microbes are attracted to or thrive in that root zone. So the mycorrhizae are kind of like conductors, orchestrating this complex underground ecosystem.
Okay, this sounds like a pretty universal, incredibly beneficial partnership.
Yeah.
But are all these fungus root teams the same? Or are there different kinds of mycorrhizae?
That's a great question. No, they're not all the same. There's actually a diverse range of mycorrhizal types based on exactly how the fungus and the root interact physically. But the material we looked at focuses mainly on two major types, ectomycorrhizae and endomycorrhizae.
Endo and exto.
And the endomycorrhizae are often called arbuscular mycorrhizae, or AMF for short. You'll see that acronym a lot, AMF.
Got it. AMF. So let's break those down. Ectomycorrhizae first. What's their style?
Okay, ecto meaning outside. These ones are kind of like a fungal glove fitting snugly around the root tip. The fungus forms this dense sheath or mantle that completely covers the outside of the young root.
A covering.
Yeah, a protective covering. And from that mantle, the fungal hyphae then branch out extensively into the surrounding soil to forage for water and minerals. You find this type commonly associated with many forest trees, pines, oaks, birches, for example.
So they stay mostly on the outside of the root, but with threads going out.
Mostly, yes. The hyphae might grow slightly between the outer root cells, forming a network called the Hardig net, but they don't penetrate into the cells. Now, endomycorrhizae, or AMF, they're different. Endo means inside.
Okay, so they go inside.
They do. They don't form that thick external mantle like the ectos. Instead, the fungal hyphae actually grow into the root tissue itself. They penetrate the cell walls, but not the cell membrane. They kind of invaginate it.
Whoa! So the fungus is literally living inside the root cells. That sounds intense.
It is. It's a very intimate connection. And within those root cells, they form highly specialized structures. The most important ones are called arbuscules.
Arbuscules.
Yeah, they look like tiny, intricately branched, tree-like structures inside the cell. Arbuscule means little tree. And these are the primary sites where that crucial exchange happens, where the fungus delivers minerals and water, and the plant gives back sugars and lipids.
The trading post inside the cell.
Exactly. AMF can also form these balloon-like structures called vesicles, often between or sometimes within the root cells. These seem to act mainly as storage bodies, containing lipids and other reserves for the fungus.
Arbuscules for trading, vesicles for storage. Got it.
And importantly, AMF hyphae also extend far out into the soil from the root, just like the ectomycorrhizae do, greatly expanding that nutrient and water absorption zone.
And these AMF ones are the most common type.
By far. Found in, well, the sources say over 80% of all land plants. That includes most of our agricultural crops, grasses, vegetables, flowers, even many houseplants. They're incredibly widespread.
Wow, 80%. Okay. You mentioned the sources briefly touched on some other less common types too.
Yeah, just to show the diversity, there are, for instance, ericoid mycorrhizae. These are really important for plants in the heather family, like blueberries, rhododendrons, azaleas, plants that often thrive in really acidic, nutrient-poor soils.
What do they do differently?
They're particularly good at accessing nitrogen that's locked up in complex organic matter. The fungi produce potent enzymes, proteinases, that break down proteins in the soil litter, releasing amino acids that the fungus can then absorb and pass to the plant.
Clever way to get nitrogen in tough conditions.
Very. And then there are the orchid mycorrhizae. This is where the story gets really, really interesting, kind of turns things on their head.
Oh, what's the twist with orchids?
Okay, so orchid seeds are minuscule, like dust. They have virtually no stored food reserves at all.
Tiny seeds, right?
So for them to even germinate and start growing, they absolutely must be colonized by a compatible fungus right from the start. And here's the twist.
Yeah.
Initially, the young orchid seedling is actually parasitic on the fungus.
The plant is parasitic on the fungus, not the other way around.
Exactly. The little orchid relies entirely on the fungus for all its nutrition, especially carbon compounds, sugars, for often the first few years of its life. Sometimes, for orchids that never develop chlorophyll, they rely on the fungus their entire life.
No way.
Yep. The fungi involved, often types like Rhizoptonia, are typically ones that break down dead organic matter in the soil. They basically feed the baby orchid until it's big enough to usually start photosynthesizing for itself. It's a complete reversal of the usual sugar for nutrients trade, at least at the beginning.
That is absolutely fascinating, a parasitic plant phase. Okay, so this incredible, complex, sometimes surprising system is running all around us, underground. How do we support it? What can you, the listener, actually do to encourage healthy mycorrhizal networks in your garden, your farm, wherever you have soil?
Well, the great news is, in most soils, these beneficial fungi are likely already present. It's often less about adding them, especially in established environments, and more about creating conditions that let them thrive and build those extensive networks.
So it's about encouraging what's already there.
Often, yes.
Yeah.
And there are some key things the research points to. One of the biggest factors is reducing soil disturbance.
Like digging and plowing.
Exactly. Activities like intensive plowing or tilling, common in some types of agriculture and even gardening. Well, they physically break apart those delicate fungal hyphae networks in the soil.
Shredding the web.
Pretty much. And this disruption can negatively impact not just the extent of the network, but also the diversity, the composition of the fungal community living there. Practices like conservation tillage, no-till farming, or just minimizing digging in your garden tend to be much better for maintaining healthy mycorrhizal populations.
Okay, so less digging, disturbing the soil less, keep those threads intact. What else?
Another really crucial strategy is planting a diverse range of plant species.
Variety is key.
Absolutely. Different plants tend to form associations with different types or species of mycorrhizal fungi. So if you have a monoculture, just one type of crop, or only lawn grass, you're likely supporting a less diverse fungal community underground. By planting a mix of things, different types of trees, shrubs, perennials, maybe incorporating cover crops in agricultural settings, you create more niches and support a wider variety of fungi. This increases the overall diversity and resilience of the whole soil microbiome, including the mycorrhizae.
Makes sense. Diversity above ground supports diversity below ground. What about adding things to the soil, like fertilizers, pesticides?
Right. This is a big one, and perhaps one where our actions can have the most significant unintended consequences. Overusing synthetic fertilizers, especially those high in readily available phosphorus, that can actually backfire when it comes to mycorrhizae.
How so? I thought plants needed phosphorus.
They do, but think back to the deal. The plant pays the fungus sugar in exchange for nutrients. The fungus forages. If you suddenly flood the soil around the root with easy-to-get phosphorus from fertilizer...
The plant doesn't need the fungus as much.
Exactly. The plant gets lazy, you could say. Why expend precious energy paying the fungus to go find phosphorus when it's being delivered right to its doorstep?
So the plant cuts back its investment in the partnership.
Precisely. It reduces the carbon flow to the fungus, which in turn leads to reduced fungal growth, less extensive networks, and sometimes even shifts in the fungal community towards less beneficial types. The research suggests that lower, more targeted fertilizer applications tend to optimize the symbiosis, keeping both partners engaged.
Interesting. Don't make it too easy for the plant.
Kind of, yeah. And then there are pesticides and fungicides. Unsurprisingly, some fungicides can directly harm beneficial mycorrhizal fungi, but even some herbicides and insecticides can have negative effects, maybe inhibiting spore germination or hyphal growth. The sources mention specific examples like azoxystrobin or glyphosate potentially having inhibitory effects, though results can vary.
So being cautious with chemical inputs is important.
Very. Opting for more organic methods, biological controls, things that work with the soil biology rather than against it, generally tends to be much less disruptive and more supportive of these fungal networks.
Okay, and finally, what about just feeding the soil itself? Organic matter.
Yes, definitely. Incorporating organic matter, things like compost, aged manure, or growing cover crops and leaving the residue is broadly beneficial for soil health. While the mycorrhizal fungi get their main energy source, carbon, directly from the plant.
The sugar payment.
Right. But that added organic matter feeds a whole host of other beneficial soil microbes. And as we discussed, mycorrhizae are part of this larger soil food web. A healthy, active soil community generally supports healthy mycorrhizal populations. Organic inputs can positively influence the fungal community composition, too.
Okay, let's zoom out a bit. Thinking beyond our own gardens or local plots, how significant are mycorrhizae in the bigger picture? Issues like agriculture, feeding the world, or maybe restoring damaged landscapes.
Well, they're absolutely foundational. The material we reviewed consistently stresses their critical role in overall soil fertility and health. They improve the soil's physical properties like structure and water retention.
The aggregation, the glue.
Exactly. They improve chemical properties by making nutrients more available. And they boost biological properties by influencing microbial activity and nutrient cycling. They can even help moderate soil acidity in some cases. They're ecosystem engineers, really.
Wow. So in agriculture, what's the potential?
Well, there's growing interest in research into leveraging mycorrhizae for more sustainable agriculture.
Yeah.
Using AMF inoculation, for example, where you add fungal spores or hyphae to the soil or seeds.
Adding the fungi.
Yes, especially where they might be lacking or depleted. This is seen as a potentially eco-friendly way to improve crop nutrition, maybe reduce the reliance on heavy synthetic fertilizer inputs, enhance plant tolerance to stresses like drought, and even contribute to disease management through biocontrol effects.
So they could be a key tool for growing food more sustainably, using fewer chemicals.
That's certainly the hope and the direction a lot of research is heading, harnessing this natural system that's already evolved to be efficient, and similarly in ecological restoration.
Fixing damaged land.
Yes, especially on severely degraded sites. Think about areas like former mine lands, or places suffering extreme erosion, where the topsoil and its native microbial community have been basically wiped out. Introducing mycorrhizal fungi, again, often through inoculation, can be a critical first step
Why?
because it helps the very first plants trying to colonize that harsh environment to get established. It gives them that crucial nutrient and water uptake boost they need to survive. It can really kickstart the whole process of ecosystem recovery.
So they help bring life back to barren land.
They can be a vital tool for that, yes.
Yes.
Although it's worth noting, the sources often suggest that if there's any existing native fungal community working to manage and encourage, that first is usually preferable to just introducing commercial inoculants. But in truly devastated areas, inoculation can be necessary, and research is constantly working on improving those techniques.
And just thinking about how long this partnership has been around, you mentioned it's ancient.
Oh, incredibly ancient. The fossil record suggests this symbiosis dates back hundreds of millions of years, right back to when the very first plants were making the transition from water to land.
Really? That far back?
Yeah. It's widely thought that this partnership with fungi was actually one of the key adaptations that allowed vascular plants to successfully colonize the terrestrial environment in the first place, helping them cope with the relatively nutrient-poor, challenging conditions of early Earth soils. It's fundamental to life on land as we know it.
We've covered so much ground, no pun intended, about this hidden world. But science is always moving forward, right?
Right.
What are some of the big unanswered questions or maybe challenges that researchers are still grappling with when it comes to mycorrhizae, based on the sources you looked at?
Yeah, absolutely. Despite knowing so much, there are definitely still plenty of mysteries down there. The research we reviewed certainly highlights areas where our understanding is, well, incomplete or still
I
developing.
think there's
Well, for instance, while we talk a lot about the beneficial interactions with other microbes, the flip side is also true. How exactly do some specific soil microorganisms actually inhibit or maybe compete with mycorrhizal fungi? What are the mechanisms and what does that mean for the plants and the overall soil health? It's still being teased apart.
okay, the negative interactions too.
Right. And there are also deeper questions about the role of AMF within the broader soil food web. We talk about them as partners, but under what conditions might they become, say, prey for other soil organisms? Or could they even act more like parasites on the plant under certain extreme stress conditions? The dynamics might be more complex than a simple win-win all the time.
Interesting. Like, do tiny soil animals eat the fungal networks?
Exactly. How significant is that? And how do these fungi interact with other specific groups, like different types of soil nematodes, those microscopic roundworms? Especially when the plants they're partnered with are already stressed, maybe from drought or nutrient deficiency. How do all those interactions play out?
Lots of complex relationships down there.
Definitely. And as we touched upon with soil management, while we have general principles like reduced tillage is often good, the precise, specific, and sometimes even contradictory effects of different chemical applications or different types of tillage on the diverse communities of mycorrhizal fungi, that still needs a lot more study. Especially across different soil types, climate conditions, and cropping systems, the context really, really matters, and we don't have all the answers yet.
Well, this deep dive has certainly opened my eyes to the sheer complexity and, frankly, the wonder of the world just beneath our feet. It's incredible.
It really is. Mycorrhizae are truly some of the unsung heroes of our ecosystems. This ancient, intricate partnership is just vital for nutrient uptake, water access, protecting plants, and building the very structure and health of our soil.
And it feels like the key takeaway is that our actions, whether in a farm field or a backyard garden, have a real direct impact on these crucial underground networks.
Absolutely. By doing things like reducing how much we disturb the soil, by embracing diversity in what we plant, and by being really mindful, cautious about our use of synthetic fertilizers and pesticides,
Yeah.
we can actively support these essential partners.
It sounds like they're ready and willing to do the hard work, building those connections, cycling nutrients, if we just create the right conditions, the right environment for them to flourish.
Exactly. We need to work with them, not against them.
So here's something to think about as we wrap up. Considering how fundamentally dependent plants are on these vast, unseen fungal networks for their very survival and health, and understanding the significant benefits the fungi receive in return, does knowing all this change how you think about, well, the dirt in your garden or the forest floor when you go for a walk? Does it maybe shift your perspective on the fundamental interconnectedness of life itself?